Hello everyone. Um, so I'm basically in Jammu and Kashmir right now, working with the Indian Armed Forces, and what we're doing here basically is just like we train dogs for the army early in the morning and sort of like early evening, right? Uh, Apart from that, basically, I'm just sitting here and doing nothing, and I'm here for a fairly long time. So I have a lot of time to kill, and I'm in a fairly remote location. There's nothing to do around here. I mean, honestly, I don't even know if it's safe to get out of the camp. Okay, probably isn't. Um, So most of the times I am stuck in this very tiny room, apart from when we go to the training grounds. Um, so I thought that I'd take this opportunity to shoot some, content in relation to, basically my podcast and all that. Um, with so much going on in relation to work, I haven't been able to do podcasts for a while now, and I really apologize for that for our listeners. Um, the thing is, these set of podcasts that I might be able to do here may not be a lot, but how many ever I am able to do, they might be, they probably will be fairly short, and they may not have the best editing, right? So it's going to be very like, just me sort of trying to speak my mind as we go. Okay, so bear with me. So I asked a few of my friends what they would like me to talk about, right? And one of the topics that they wanted me to talk about was how to start and run a working dog club. And yeah, so it got me thinking about all the things that we did in order to start our club and keep it running and make it as successful as it is. Um, and it's been active for quite some time now, and it probably is still probably the biggest working dog club in the country, and definitely the most accomplished working dog club in the country. So I thought I'll give you a little bit of an insight on what I feel about how we should go about this. So one of the things I see on Facebook, and this is, primarily I see, how things happen in America probably, is, people say start it and they will come, and I guess it makes a lot of sense from an American perspective, but I don't necessarily think that's true for India. Okay, like there are a lot of reasons why I don't think that's true for India necessarily. One of the things being that to begin with, the working dogs is not as common a thing, and not as many people know about it as in the US, right? Especially outside of the professional dog community, like be it breeders, trainers, whatever, like among hobbyists and stuff, right? So it's to begin with, it's not as common. A lot of times I see people have a lot of misconceptions in regards to working dogs. Like I've come across so many people that have been interested in, let's say, doing PSA and coming to club, but they've had like very wrong sort of ideas about how to go about this. Like they feel like they watch the the level of training that, let's say, a PSA 1 dog does, or a PSA 2 dog does, or even for that matter a PDC dog does, right? Which to an average pet parent is still quite a lot. And they think like, hours and hours of training every day goes into that. And when I tell these people that, we train maybe like 5 minutes of obedience per dog and maybe 5 to 10 minutes of obedience, for 5 to 10 minutes of protection per dog, right? Which is not like more than 15 to 20 minutes for each dog, which I think I'm still sort of, pushing it a little bit more, right? Than what it actually is. But when I tell them, they're shocked. And maybe a lot of people don't believe me. Like a lot of people think that, I'm just trying to sell them this idea, right? So, there are all these wrong ideas that people have. Apart from that, a biting dog being a dangerous dog. Like, we have kids at home, we live, in a, in an apartment complex or something of that sort. Which, okay, like I'm not going to lie, is a fair bit of a concern in terms of, you need to handle your dog responsibly. You need to understand the ins and outs of all of this. But the reality of it is, let's say when you get a puppy, right, and by the time that dog has the capacity to be like an actual protection dog, okay, if that's where you want to head with this, because a lot of times people have just sport dogs, like a lot of them are just not capable of functioning outside of the sporting setting, right? But a lot of us at our club pride on sort of having our dogs be protection dogs outside of the sport, right? Not that we need it, but I feel like, you know since we are training protection, what the heck, why not like really train protection? So just from that standpoint, really. But yeah, like there, what's going to happen is, when you get a puppy and by the time that dog is going to actually head towards, or like anywhere near being a protection dog, by that time you'll have hours and hours and hours of handling experience under your belt, right? Which means as your dog is developing into a protection dog, you are developing into a much better handler, right? So for all those people who sort of get in touch with trainers like me, that we need a protection dog or something like that, honestly I feel like clubs are a much better option, because then that sort of develops you as a team for one thing, and the other thing is that it sort of gives you a reality check as to what a protection dog is going to be, you know and it's not just from the perspective of your dog, but you come to club and you see all the dogs working, and you see the culture around them, you see how we interact or don't interact with each other's dogs outside of certain situations and so on, right? Plus you have a community of people around you that are going to help you raise your dog, and are going to sort of help you foresee certain situations that otherwise you may not be able to, right? So but yes, this is something that people have the wrong idea about, and that sort of keeps them from coming to club. Now this was about, by and large, hobbyists, but it's about other trainers. We all know, as trainers, we tend to be a fairly egoistic sort of a community in general, right? And we have a lot of problems within us in relation to that, and a lot of that sometimes keeps trainers from coming to a club, right? Like, we have a lot of experience with that. We are a fairly successful club in our city, and a lot of people won't train with us because we've had some problems in the past. And I'm not saying they may be to blame for the problem, I may have been to blame for that problem, but you know, we've all grown up. I'm not the same person I was a few years back or whatever, and I'm sure they aren't as well. But a lot of times it gets sort of difficult, or at some point when the ego is let go of, the awkwardness maybe stays a little bit or whatever. But that also is, something that sort of holds people back. So now I'm talking about, I'm supposed to be talking about how to run a club and how to start a club, and I'm sort of going on and on about, what are the potential problems that keep people from coming to club. I mean, what I'm saying essentially is that you have to fight against these particular things, right? When you do that, um, I guess a lot of it will be easier. A lot of times I see people trying to convince, like, let's say they have a club going, and they have a few people that do train with them at their club, right? And a lot of times you see these people sort of try to convince these people to train in the direction of a competition field and sort of go into competition and compete and so on. Okay, but at the same time, they don't seem to be headed that way. Uh, well, at least not at a at a substantial pace anyway. You know? So this I feel like this doesn't really work this way. Like, convincing people isn't the most effective option in this situation. I feel like people are much easily inspired as opposed to convinced, right? So, once you have a club going and you have a few people there, right? um, if you train hard, and and when I say train hard, I don't mean like ride your dog to exhaustion or something like that. But I'm saying train hard when you plan, when you put in the time to plan, even outside of, like, when your dog's not even out on the field. You put in the time to think about it, you put in the time to talk to accomplished people, you do all those things, and then you try and execute that on the field consistently. uh, and you seem like you're headed towards higher titles and stuff like that. A lot of times when you achieve those titles, uh, people feel like, people who are with you, they feel like, what, maybe with your help I can do it too. And then that sort of uh, pushes them towards the same sort of path that you've traveled, right? At least this has been like what has been successful for me, I believe, right? Just to give you like a few examples about this, like in 2022, when I was able to go to the US and certify as a PSA trial decoy, I came back and we had a good bunch of people who started training really hard to become trial decoys, and by the end of 2022, we had 4 more decoys from our club certify as trial decoys, right? Um, People started training really hard, and it sort of rubbed off in another way as well, where that we had a really successful trial that year as well. Most of our people finished their PDCs, which were very new. I got my PSA 1 in a weekend. I think my dog probably in India is the only dog since the two-leg started happening for the ones, that he's closed his ones in one weekend. Um, uh, After that, when I got my first leg of the twos, uh, I feel like people from my club again, like, really started training hard for the ones, and we just very recently closed out 2 more PSA ones, and now what's that done for them? And at the same time, I closed out my twos. So what's done for them, what that's done for them is that they're now training really, really hard for the twos. Like I honestly feel like I've never seen them train as hard as they're doing right now. So, I really, really tend to believe that inspiration sort of plays a big role in all of this. And then eventually, it's not just going to be inspiration from just you, it's going to be inspiration from each other, right? Like different club members as well. Um, After this, I want to talk a little bit about the club atmosphere, right? I feel like it's best to be very natural in this regard. I mean, whoever is starting the club. See, the thing is, I've seen fairly successful clubs where the training director sort of rules with an iron fist, and I've seen fairly successful clubs where there's a lot more freedom, and uh, the training director is very suggestive in his or her approach. you know so um, I don't think necessarily one way is more successful than the other. I'm not really sure, but I don't think so necessarily. But what I do feel is, whatever your club atmosphere, right, you will typically attract people who will thrive in that kind of an atmosphere. That's one. And the ones who don't will probably leave, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that necessarily, right? Not everyone is going to fit in sort of every kind of atmosphere, or not every community is for everyone, which is fine, right? It's nothing against you or that person or anything of that sort. But what I do think is, you as the person who started that club doesn't really have anywhere to go. So if you try to be unnatural to what comes easily to you, and then you don't really have anywhere to go, because you started a club and it is a certain way, and then your sort of being unnatural sort of wears out after a while, and now you're like, no, I want it to be this way now. And now suddenly it's a big change for people to take or whatever, right? That can happen. So I guess do what's much more natural to you. At my club, at WDCP, we try to create like a very like a team environment kind of a thing, right? Like every title is everyone's title, okay? Every success is everyone's success, every failure is everyone's failure, right? We want people to be extremely invested in each other's journey, right? That's how we want to do it, okay? The leadership role is very limited, I would say, okay? What I mean by that is, the leadership role has come to me more or less naturally from the point of view of a training leadership role, okay? Because it just so happens that I am the more experienced and the more maybe skilled individual in the team currently, okay? So it sort of ends up falling on me, but that does not necessarily translate to like non-training situations, meaning logistical decisions, or those kind of things are not necessarily mine to take just because I become a leader from a training perspective, right? And even from a training perspective, my leadership style, and that's because that is natural to me, is I don't want to sort of tell you exactly how to do things. What I like to do is I tell you the potential advantages and disadvantages of certain situations, and if you're doing it a certain way, what can go wrong and what can happen well. If you're doing it any other way, what can go wrong and what can go well, and those kind of things, right? And then you can make a decision. There may be times when you want to do it a certain way and I'm not really sure about it. I tell you I'm not sure about it. Like if you take a few steps and then you're not sure what to do, and if that way isn't something I'm experienced with, I may not be able to guide you out of that situation, right? And I very openly tell you about this. So, what that does is, I'm not so much as leading, but I just want to be a guide, because I want you to be successful. Because I really I count those titles as my own titles, right? My club's titles. I'm very aware of the fact that if people want to trust, if I want my people to sort of trust my abilities and keep trusting my abilities, uh, as a training director, uh, I need to keep evolving. You know, like I cannot. I mean, at least that's the way I feel. Okay, uh, I have a little bit of a problem with sort of, uh, having the basis of me being the guide for you be some success I had in like 2019 or something like that. You know what I'm saying? Right? Like, so I have to evolve with my own dog, with my own training, uh, with people that I coach and their success and my own success and so on, right? If I need people to keep trusting my ability, I need to sort of keep showing that I am still able. At our club, we typically want people to compete and bring titles for the club. Okay, we want people who are serious about competing. Now, this may not be true for every club, especially if you're a newish club. I might not necessarily recommend this sort of path. Okay, you would probably want to take in most people as long as they fit into your sort of vibe or whatever, right, into your culture, right? But if that's pretty good, um, I feel like the competing or non-competing shouldn't be much of a problem in the beginning. For us right now, we have a good number of people already. We have some people in the higher levels. We have some people who are very promising now in the lower levels and so on. And so we don't typically want to waste time on people who are not going to bring more recognition to the club. Okay, and I know that might make me sound, I don't know, like that may not rub a lot of people the right way, but the the thing is, whether you like it or not, a title is proof of your abilities and your dog's abilities, right? And that is what we are doing here. You know, I know that on social media, a lot of times there are these things where, you know, yeah, all you want is validation. All you want is validation. Well, if you don't want validation, you can just sit in your balcony and be like, yes, I could have a PSA 3 and never step onto the field. Okay, so I'm not going to shy away from the fact that yes, a title validates our ability and we want that. And we don't typically want to spend time, energy, effort, money on people who are not going to bring that for the club. Or, I mean, not in terms of their abilities, but just the fact that they don't even want to do it. Like, a lot of times people will come and they're like, yes, I want to train, but I don't want to compete. Like that kind of thing. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Okay, it's just that that's at this point in time of the lifeline of the our club, it just doesn't make sense for us. That's all I mean. It might make a lot of sense for some other clubs, which is fine. I don't mind that, right? Now, I have to mention that there may be some exceptions to this. Sometimes someone ends up at club. It's very hard to say how, but they do, and they're an amazing team man, or like they're an amazing team person. Um, they are very invested in everyone's competing, in their titles, in their journey, in their successes. You know, um, they may spot for everyone. They may decoy a lot. Even if they're not good decoys, a lot of times um, they will put on the suit as distraction for obedience. They will put in the effort for everyone else, and they don't themselves want to compete. Okay, and this is not happened by design, but somehow they've ended up at club and whatever, right? Like they had a dog and they wanted to compete, and the dog was not good enough, but they don't want to get another dog, whatever it might have been, right? But it's come to a point where they're not going to compete. They are part of our club, and we want them to stay part of our club because they are an asset to the club. Okay. Now, sometimes I see, like, what, you're not, like, this sort of, like, people wanting to throw it in my face, but the thing is, we reserve the right to sort of have exceptions to this, and then people will be like, but what, like, I'll be an asset, I'll do. Yeah, you know, that's just not going to work at this point, right? Um, we are well into our journey, and right now, if we want anyone uh, coming into club, we want them to sort of share the same goals that we do, right? Without that, it doesn't make sense for us. Now, why I'm telling you all of this is, try and know what exactly you want, okay, and try and know where you are in terms of the development of your club. A lot of times I see clubs that are not as developed, or they're considerably new, or new in terms of members or what they've done, or those kind of things, and they are extremely choosy about who they want in their club and stuff like that. And yes, I agree, a lot of times it's hard, uh, but and yes, you still have to be choosy. You can't just let anyone into your club, because that's your team, right, at the end of the day. But at the same time, maybe as a young club, you're probably going to have a little more leeway. At least we did when we were younger, and you know and that worked out, I think, pretty decently for us. I feel like titles tend to be an incentive for trainers to sort of keep evolving to the next level. Um, Without that, a lot of times you may not train in a particular direction. A lot of times I've seen, training sort of just becomes sort of coming to club and going through the motions, and those kind of things. So I feel like, you know uh, titles sort of become important from that standpoint. Now, someone would argue that what if you keep training for the title and the next title and the next title, but you never really go and compete? And the thing is, well, it doesn't really still give you, this feeling of success, or, those kind of things. And then people will be like, no, it does to me. I'm like, yes, but it's not just about you. If you want the entire team to, like, if you want your decoys to break their backs for your dogs, you know, uh, you have to give them something that is, uh, a little more like, which is a little more solid, like an actual title, right? I'm not saying, like, I know I'm sounding like I'm making all of this. This is just about titles, and it's not. It's about the journey. I really get that, okay? I really do. But I really feel like if you don't know where you're going, you'll never get there, you know? So this is I think how this is the base philosophy on which we've based the Working Dog Club of Pune. I think we are probably, in terms of numbers, still the biggest club in India, probably. Um, in terms of achievements, most definitely we are the most established club in India for sure. Um, we've trained and certified 5 trial decoys within the club, uh, and I think we've had what, maybe like 5 PSA 1s and 1 PSA 2, and I've sort of lost count of the PDCs. I'm not flexing, sorry, I've really lost count. Uh, but yeah, we've been able to be fairly successful, I have to say, and just wanted to share that this is how we've built the club. Thank you for listening, and I'm sorry for the blabbering in between. Like I said, I'm not the best editing on these videos, due to my situation right now. Um, Hopefully, I'll be able to shoot another one tomorrow. See you guys.